Rachel
Great.
Hollis. Rachel Hollis, I'm so happy that you're here. I I'm so happy that you're here. I think about you all the time that I feel like you're my best friend, but we've never met.
What a sweet thing to say. Well, I am so happy to be here. Thank you for taking the time.
That's really generous. No, I feel like, when you see someone, you really see them. And I feel like a lot of people can really see you and you give so much. You're so unbelievably generous, constantly pouring yourself out to help this collective to rise. And I'm like, how many hugs could she possibly get today? Because she could use all the hugs.
I miss hugs. I miss hugs so desperately. I honestly, when this pandemic is over, people just better get ready because I'm gonna be tackling people in the streets. I miss those connections so desperately. But I appreciate that you say that. It is absolutely my intention in life to put goodness and positivity out into the world. And I am typically talking about or teaching the things that I have struggled with, or maybe even am struggling with in real time. So I always feel like, well, if I need this, there's a chance that maybe she needs this as well. And
Totally.
now the dog is at the door. So hold on one
Go
second, guys.
ahead.
Sorry. Come on. Come on, buddy. Good boy. Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, and I guess what I want to acknowledge is that once a person is where you're at and they're just like this famous person, it's really easy to not get how much they have overcome to be able to stand in that space. And you're a mom and you have 4 kids and you've written about all the things that you've gone through since you were itty bitty. And it's just like, let's just witness it. Let's just honor it. Let's just take a second for it because it's a lot. And it's
Yeah,
kind of Herculean that you're who you are because it's a lot of things. And you're still not only
it's
showing
a
up for
lot.
it, but you like help other people too. Let's just honor that. That's what I mean.
Thank you. I think it is a lot of things. And what I've learned over time, I was actually just talking to somebody about this yesterday, that I think when we're younger in our careers or in our journey of whatever success looks like to us, we tend to believe that it will get easier. Like, oh, if I can just get to this level, if I can just do this thing, or if I can just, and that's actually not true. Sorry, now the dog's gonna make all kinds of noise.
That's okay. We have
I
lovely editing, so we can get
Great.
rid of it.
I work harder today than I ever have in my entire life. And in order to continue to evolve as a creative and as a writer and as a leader and as a woman, it looks like work, because evolution is work. And so it's not just, I think, for any of us about what did it take to sort of get here. It's also, what does it take to maintain that or sustain that momentum so that you can keep growing.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And I just, there's the whole bunch of people playing the circuit right now. So I just want you to know behind the scenes, I told my team, I interviewed Matthew McConaughey and Priyanka, all the people, right? And I was like,
Mhm.
I'm not intimidated by them. I'm intimidated to interview Rachel Hollis.
Oh my
I
gosh,
like,
please don't
I
be.
had to have a good cry an hour ago because I had to just like move it up and out. With Matthew, I was like, hi, hotness, but I
Right,
didn't need to
right.
like, with you, it's like just fully as a woman, just and a mom and all the things, your life, your marriage, your career. I'm just like, God, can someone stand up for her and keep clapping for the next 30 decades? Like it's a different kind of a awesome than winning the best beauty pageant. I just wanted to say. So let's get into it for a second because why not? You're here. So if people haven't read the books, then they're probably living somewhere deep in a cave under a rock. But just in case, let's start with what are these big lies, right? When you wrote Girl Wash Your Face, you wanted to help people stop believing things that they're constantly telling themselves. And that for sure is my audience. So what was it that made you want to write that book?
Well, I wanted to talk about some of the hardest, like the hard fought lessons that I had learned as I was growing up or becoming a woman. And when I first set out to write those things down, I didn't realize they were lies. I just started to collect these really hard seasons that I had gone through or things that I had worked through in therapy or whatever. And as I started to write them, I began to see a through line. So my best friend Sammy always calls that making a connection. She's like, "Oh, you guys, I just made a connection between this and this." And for me, I made that connection of like, oh my gosh, all of these hard things that I went through or this tension that I felt always came back to a lie that I had believed about my life. And what I would say about that, I mean, Jeffrey, you are going to get put up in another room, brother.
I
You
didn't
have
even
to
hear
not
him.
growl. Okay, he was growling. He's trying to start some with an invisible dog outside. Um, but I didn't even know like the language that I used when I wrote that back in 2017. I said, these are the lies. What I would call that today, as I have learned and understood more, is the paradigms that we are sort of born into or raised into or begin to believe. And I think we all have this, men and women, but women especially have all sorts of rules and things that we've been told by our family or by culture or society about how we're supposed to show up in the world. And I think that oftentimes our toughest seasons are when, like, on some level our spirit is, it knows that this is wrong
Yeah.
for us, knows that this doesn't serve us, knows that we are meant for something greater or more, but you maybe don't even have the language for that, or you kind of don't understand why you feel this way. So that was where it started and
Ugh,
continues to evolve from there.
it's so good. And I don't know. I think you probably know this place On Site. It's in Nashville. It's like
Oh
an hour.
yeah, totally.
So good. So I went there a year ago and I never ever thought I was codependent because I'm like hyper independent. Like I never want to bother
Right.
anybody. Da, da.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, I'm completely codependent because as a girl, I learned how to abandon myself so that everyone's okay to
Right.
such an extent that like I'm setting myself on fire. I can come up with 1,000 examples of times I was so uncomfortable and disassociating from whatever I needed because I thought this is how I earn love. This is how my role. Let's talk about that because
Yes.
88% of our audience is female. And I see that
Right.
consistently.
So I, for the first time, I'd had some people recommend it. And for the first time ever, after I went through my breakup last summer, I read Codependent No More. And it was earth shattering for me because I would say very similarly, I never really understood what it meant to be codependent. I thought that codependent means that someone is dependent on you. And I didn't understand this idea that you sort of are existing to, like, you're propping someone else, you're making sure they're okay, and not only that, not only how that manifests in your relationships as an adult, but for me it was really powerful to understand how I could track that back to my childhood and how I could understand that, growing up with parents who struggled in the way that my parents struggled would mean that I would walk into relationships as an adult with that narrative and that belief, like, I'm incredibly high capacity and I can fix it and I can solve it, and I do. And I've done that a lot. And I not only did I realize how that manifested in my relationship, but I also was able to see how that manifested in what I do for a living. Like, oh, you had parents who really struggled in these ways, and now you've devoted your life to trying to give people the tools to make change so that they can get better. It's sort of like you couldn't save and fix mom and daddy, so like could you do that for millions of people, who read your books? That was wildly powerful for me to understand, again, that pattern that I've had fallen inside of. And if we don't have anything that kind of shakes us loose
Yeah.
of the pattern or makes us rise above it and see what's happening, we'll just continue that for the rest of your life.
Oh my
So
God.
yeah,
So what do
codependence is a massive thing.
so I feel like so many of those lies, right? And so much of it is like who I need to be for somebody else, right? Or I'm not enough. And if I do this, I will be. And like a lot of that's in the book in other ways. You're saying the same thing in another way. So how do we begin as women to come back home to ourselves and allow other people to have their side of the street? Like, but feel at least like you took care of yourself, that you lived an authentic day.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. I have this like incredible perspective right now because I've just gone through a divorce, and I've gone through a divorce with someone that I met when I was 18 years old. I'm 38.
My
So I
God.
really became, and if people don't know my story, I'm still to this day never been on a date with anybody except the person I married. Like I am so inexperienced. And what I have found, there's like a beauty, there's such beauty in our story and our relationship and what we were together. And there's also, and I know this is a lot of women's story, there's also something, I don't know the word because I dangerous is what's popping in mind, but that's way too harsh
Right,
for what
right,
I'm
right.
saying, is like when you truly become an adult while in relationship with someone else, it really does form your sense of
Of
self
course.
only in relation to someone else.
Yep.
Now, maybe that would be different if I had met him when I was 30 and we got together, I would know who I was, I hope. But at 18, going on a first date at 19, like there's no
Of
way.
course.
And what I find right now is that, last year was really most of last year was just really hard, really
Of
awful, like on
course.
the floor. But when I started to kind of come up for air and started to feel like I was healing, and I, did 10 million hours of therapy and all of that stuff, what I began to discover was me. And I really was surprised because, I mean, if you know I am badass,
Oh,
like I know all the things, but there were so many parts of myself that I was like, oh, I forgot I loved that. I forgot I hated that. I forgot that I used to want this dream because, and to no fault of his own, this is just sort of how it was, at least in our relationship, codependence, is if he didn't like something, I stopped liking it. You know what I mean? Like, oh, he's not in, like, this is so silly, but I'm going to give you a really good example. I was making tuna salad yesterday, and I love dill. I love fresh dill. It's one of my favorite herbs. And I got the dill out to add it to the tuna, and immediately I stopped myself because he hates dill, hates the flavor. And I love the flavor, and I never used it in cooking. This is so dumb because it didn't even occur to me that, oh, you could do that because you like it. Like you didn't have to sort of change yourself for that person. And maybe people listening to this would roll their eyes at that, but you lose yourself in a thousand little ways.
yeah.
Do you know
And
what I mean?
it just made me cry because it's so easy for people to look at someone, especially when they're famous, and just have all these opinions, all these opinions. And I know, like, my quick one line story is my mom was suicidal when I was growing up. My dad was alcoholic. They got divorced and like been in therapy since I'm 15 and now run this like similar mission driven kind of business to help people find purpose and all this stuff. For sure, I'm doing it for my mother, right? At the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I've literally, Rachel, we just also left LA, similar story to you. Oh, and my husband used to work at Fox. So like, and I
Okay.
have 3 kids. I'm
Got it.
telling you, like I bawled my eyes out an hour ago. It's like, she has no idea. I'm one of a zillion people though, who identifies with you, of course, because you're so generous and vulnerable. But I'm like, there's a few things. Anyway, I've literally sat at the coffee bean on Beverly Drive and someone's talking to me and I see myself getting a parking ticket and I wouldn't interrupt because
Right.
I grew up. That is a survival skill,
Right.
right? It's like
Right.
trauma response. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just feel for, like, it can be beautiful too, but so it hurts me that people will have opinions and it's like, it's just the dill, but it's 1,000 ways in
Yes.
which you would just say, bye, Rach. Like,
Right. Yes.
and that's not okay.
Right. Well, and I think that and I'm sure men too, but I think women do this all the time. And it was just having so much time alone because he has the kids for half a week and I have the kids for
Right,
half a week.
right, right.
And so when the kids aren't here at first, because I got my house in like last June. And when I first experienced, co-parenting, joint custody, the kids would leave and I would be inconsolable.
Of
Like I would
course.
just be on the floor because I'm like, I've never been, I mean, if I would go on vacation or a business trip, but I had never been away from my kids. And so I did not know what I didn't know what to do with myself. And I wallowed in that for several weeks. And then I was finally like, you know what? How many freaking moms wish they could have a Sunday to
Oh my
themselves?
God, please.
Right?
Yes.
Like if this is your reality. So you
Right.
can sit here and cry about this, or you can be grateful for the goodness that's in it. And in that, like getting okay with the fact that I would have time by myself, I met myself again.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many things I remembered. So what you started out by asking is like, how do people, come
Yeah.
back to the sense of
Yeah.
self? And I
Yeah.
think it's like really getting back in touch with who were you before you were theirs? Who were you before you were that person's partner? Who were you before you were their mama or even their friend? Like, who were you? Because she is still there, and the who we were when we were younger is so formative in how we show up today,
Yeah.
and just kind of relearning those things that you used to love and that you love because you're into it. It doesn't matter if anybody else gets it. So that's a big way. And I'll just say tactically, because I love tactics. I do a lot of journaling. I do a lot of journaling. And I know there's a bunch of different ways to kind of learn yourself. And maybe I love that method because I'm a writer, but that really helps me get my thoughts sort of poured out on paper and I can kind of separate myself from them. So I do a lot of journaling. If anybody listening has never read The Artist's Way, which is like 25 years
So
old,
good. Yeah.
but there's this practice of doing
Yeah.
journaling every single morning. Really simple stuff in that book, but I highly recommend that of just, for me, journaling forces me to slow down and
Mm-hmm.
be aware.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't really know ourselves if we're not aware of what do you love, what do you hate, what are you
Right.
interested in doing.
Right.
So that's what it looked like for me.
So good. Yeah, we had Julia Cameron on the show and
Oh, love her.
she's so cute.
Yeah.
And I just also wanted to say, as we sort of close out this piece of the conversation, is that I remember in early 2000s when Al Gore and Tipper Gore got divorced. And I was like, I don't know, 21 or something, but I remember this letter she wrote to the New York Times. And she said, "We've been married all these years. If you would have been at a job for 2, 3, 4 decades and made beautiful children,
Right.
right? Like if you would have done some, people be like, that was amazing. We're going to throw you a party." She's like, instead, people are like, oh my God, this failed. That's a disaster. That she's like, Al and I made the most beautiful 40 years of our life, have the most incredible kids. And now we can be like, not that, but something else. And you would
Right.
think that people could honor, right? Like that is a success.
Right.
It's amazing. Like I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I do. I definitely do think I never realized, because I used to do this too, that we really give credit to relationships based on length, not on
It's
quality.
so dumb.
It's so dumb. And we all right now know people who have been together forever and their relationship's miserable. And yet we would celebrate like, oh, 30 years of marriage or whatever. I believe my marriage was an incredible success.
Yeah,
We
it
have
was
made beautiful things. We helped each other to grow. We have these 4 awesome
immensely.
kids. Oh my gosh. And so what everybody else perceives of that, whatever.
A
It's,
hundred percent.
yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. And I guess I would speak to anybody who's going through not just a divorce, but also a relationship of any kind. I think that it's meant to be what it was. I
Yeah.
really do live my life believing that things happen as they're meant to. And so I don't hold very tightly to what I think things are supposed to be, because I think that just creates unnecessary pain. So
Yeah.
it was exactly what it was meant to be.
Beautiful. Agreed. I'm so happy that we at least got to say that on this show. And I'm sure you've said it a million other times. So moving on to of course, it's so hard to talk about 3 of your books in this short time, but one piece I think we could talk about from Girl Stop Apologizing, which I think it's at the root of everything poisonous, is shame. I think shame
Mm-hmm.
is like, ugh, like regret is so healthy. Oh, I want to be constructive and fix, but shame. And so in this book, you literally say it's a shame-free plan for embracing and achieving your goals. But what does that mean to you? Where does shame show up, do you think, for women? And how is that dangerous? And how can we welcome all parts of ourselves so that this 20-pound brick is not carrying on our back?
I'm probably going to misquote it, but Brene Brown has this quote that I love that says something like, guilt is the feeling that you did something wrong, and shame is the feeling that you are wrong, like that there's something
I
wrong
never
with
heard it.
you.
Wow.
And that always resonated with me so much, because I feel like most women, when they don't meet whatever, invisible standard they've, the world or themselves have set
Right.
for themselves, they feel like there's something wrong with them. They're not like, oh, I didn't do that. They're like, oh, I knew it. I'm not smart enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not young enough, old enough, thin enough, whatever it is. And so we allow that feeling to control what comes next. I think shame is something that is used for a lot of us, by parents, by our family of origin, maybe by partners in the past, to control us. And then we allow that shame that we manifest ourselves to control our actions too. And the reason I wanted to call it shame free was because so many women, like, I tend to attract women who have big dreams, who are ambitious,
Yeah.
who are extra, who have bright lights to shine, and they struggle with what other people think of them for that. What does their mother-in-law think, or their partner, or kids, or friends, or whoever? And so they stop themselves from trying or putting themselves out there for fear of what's going to happen if they do. And it is not a light switch, at least for me. I wish that it's something that we could just kind of flip off, and then those feelings never pop up again, or that negative self-talk never shows up in your life. But what I found is it really is a process of learning yourself, learning your triggers, like what's going to set you off, and learning how to navigate around them. I actually made a big decision yesterday. I haven't told my team yet, and I haven't announced this publicly, but I made a big decision yesterday that I am going to shut off all comments on all my social media platforms forever. And I made that decision because I have spent so much time working on not caring what other people think and not hearing that negative voice. And I've done so much work on this. Like, I don't know if anybody has worked as hard on this topic as I have. But I've noticed this shift in the last year, especially. And I don't know if it's because people are at home or they have more time. There's so much vitriol in the comment section. And truthfully, what I have done for the last year is, like, when I happen to see something, and, like, look, if I say something stupid or ignorant, it is, yes, be like, girl, we don't say that. That is, you don't, whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. I've learned, thank you for that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking
I
about
know.
me posting a picture of, like, a tree,
I
and someone being like, you're ugly, go die. Like, you would not believe the comments, like the things people say. And what I've gone to do is, I will go look at people I admire. I'll go look at The Rock, or, Lizzo, or Reese Witherspoon, or just different people. And I'll scroll until I find people saying hateful things to them. And I'm like, oh, see, look, this is the price of admission. This is how the internet works. It is what it is. And I had this, like, epiphany yesterday. I thought, if my kid was being bullied,
Right.
I would not tell them to go find another kid getting bullied to know that that was normal and okay. No freaking way. And it really is, like, social media has become this thing where it's like, you're coming into my yard. You're coming into my house and being like, this is ugly. I hate this house. I would
Right.
never. You know what I mean? It's crazy. And as a creator, it does begin to affect what you put out in the world.
100%.
You control your message. You don't say the same things. Like, I have found myself, I'll just, like, put an emoji, like, literally, I'll have a picture and I'll just put, like, a heart emoji. I will say nothing. And I found myself doing that. Sorry, I don't know if I can cuss on your show.
Go
I'm a
ahead.
fucking writer, and I'm not writing because I know that someone's going to find something in that to hate on. And then other people will try and come to my defense. And then it's crazy. And I know that there are people who don't have comments on, like Taylor Swift doesn't have comments
Yep.
on anything she
Yep.
does. And I feel like I've hesitated to do it because I'm like, no, you're strong enough. Like, you got this. You can take this. And I just had this like thing yesterday where I thought, no,
Yeah.
no, you don't get, if you want to hate me, awesome. You don't get to do that in my space.
Yep.
So this is sort of the boundary. This is kind of going back to that idea of codependence, is if you were raised in a certain way, if you were raised to be a good girl, if you were raised to be pleasing to others, if you were raised to make sure that you got good grades and the teachers liked you and mom and daddy were proud, this ends up manifesting in how we show up in other places. And we believe that on some level, you deserve to get to say those things about me. Oh, did I not show up in the right way?
Oh my
Did my hair
God.
not look good? Was my outfit not right? You know, I saw, I don't normally review comments, but the other day I was in there because I just wanted to write back. People were saying really sweet things. My son had done an episode of a
Yeah,
show with
saying
me, and
he's
yeah,
so
he's so
freaking
cute and he was
cute.
so proud of himself. So I was going in to just like say thank you because people were being so sweet. And someone was just like, literally, who do you think you are? Like, what are you even doing? You're trying to do, now you have a show and then you're this, and then now you're a writer and you're whatever. And then other women were like, finally, someone said it. Who does she think and I was like, blocked because I'm just like, get out of here. But at the same time, I thought, man, if I create content that you don't like, unfollow me. That's it. But the fact that you would follow me just to say hateful things, I'm continuing this paradigm
So true.
that you get an opinion here,
It's
and that
so
you
true.
can shame me into silence, or that you can shame me into not posting. And so I feel like, honestly, I'm going to pull a soapbox, but I feel like as a society, we have got to start saying this is not okay.
It's not okay.
It's not okay.
No.
It is so awful. Like, I love Lizzo. She's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And she posted this thing the other day that she was clearly trying to make people smile. She was like getting ready to go to the gym and she was like putting a wig on. It was so funny. And she's clearly trying to do something, put it out in the world to make people. And I can't even believe the stuff people wrote. And this wasn't like you had to scroll down. This was just one after another about her body, about what she needed to look like, about girl. It's not okay. And we accept it. We accept it and say that this is what social is. And I just, no.
Yeah,
So.
no, it's so cruel. And my husband always says, like, when I get like a nasty comment or someone has to go and leave a 1-star review on the podcast, he's like, their tax dollars don't go to you.
Right.
What do they care?
That's what
you owe them nothing. Right. They can just like click off of it. She's an idiot, unsubscribe. But instead it's like, no, I will take my precious time to make sure she knows she says like too much. She's actually too happy. I don't like her freckles. She needs to get her teeth done. And I'm like, oh, that's just me.
Right.
Like, and because you and I are actually really vulnerable, I care. I'm an empath. Like, I feel things. So how could I not feel that? Right. Absolutely.
Well, and it's like I just hit a point where I was like, you know what? I've done all the work on me that I need to do. I cannot tell you how many times I have prayed, with a therapist, just like, what am I meant to learn? Why am I getting this? Why did I see that comment? Like, what was I supposed to learn from this? And I'm like, maybe what I'm supposed to learn is to stick up for myself.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, as someone with a platform, and if you're listening to this right now, I'm not just talking about the platform I have. I think that someone who has 500 followers on social media probably gets this. Or maybe you're just posting on your personal Facebook page and your Aunt Mildred saying something crazy to you. Like, we all have our version of this, and it is not our job to accept that. You can think whatever you want, you can write whatever you want, but you're not going to do it in my space, because as a person with a platform, I can't defend myself. I can't go in and
You
clap back at
can't.
you
No,
because
you
I'm going to start
cannot.
a war.
Oh, no, no, no.
And so
Yeah.
it's like, I just have to take this.
No.
No. So
And
I
the
don't know
thing
what the
is,
answer is, but it's definitely not what's happening right now.
well, I love that you're gonna hopefully start like a beautiful trend for so many of us. I think that's
I hope
really
so too.
refreshing because I feel sometimes that the creator is being taken hostage because you can't
Yeah,
say anything. You're just like,
nothing.
okie doke. And
Right.
truthfully, and Rachel, you know this, I just spent a week with Joe Dispenza
Oh, I
and
love him.
beyond like ridiculous. And everything is a freaking hologram. So
Right.
all of that negativity, that's their projection. Like,
Right.
and yes, it's so damn easy to be threatened by you because going back to the shame, you've allowed yourself to show up when you're sweaty in your van, crying,
Right.
snotting, talking
Right.
about all the things, your period, your kids, whatever.
Right.
That is literally the brightest shining light that broke through any cloud. And do you know how much that hurts a person who does not want to let go of their shame? It's like, oh, that makes me know that I actually could and I can't. How
Right.
dare she?
Right.
How dare
Right.
she just allow herself to be who
Right.
she is with all the brokenness?
Right. My best friend talks about this a lot. My best friend was a pastor of a mega church and came out and wrote an incredible book called Worth It, which everyone should go grab. And she talks about this idea that when you experience freedom, when you have this freedom to be yourself, some people see that as a light and an example that they also can shine. And some people do feel threatened because even if they're not aware of it, subconsciously it reminds them that they're still stuck or they're still in chains or they're still not free. And so what they do is, I have to break this down or show you how you're wrong or make you feel
Yeah.
bad. And I don't even think it's a conscious thing, to be honest. I just think that this is normal. And truthfully, I think it's just as hurtful for the person who's writing it. Like, man, if I can't have social media without you, Karen, feeling the need to be me, then great.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this away because also this isn't a good thing for your heart. Like, you are creating this reality that people are mean and awful and out to get you and
Yeah.
lying and whatever. It's like it's just crazy.
Yeah, it is. And that's really, really empowering. So then you went ahead and did it again. It's like already the coolest, hardest thing in the world to write a New York Times bestselling book. And then you're like, I'll just do it 3 times because why not? I've already done it once, whatever. So then you write a book in the middle of a pandemic. You come up with another book. So didn't see that coming. Like the perfect title. I'm sure by now everyone's like, we read it, we heard it. I'm like, all right, well, this is when she was on the show. So we're going to talk about it again. So let's talk about why you felt the need to write. Clearly something was so on your heart to write this in the middle of everything that was going on. What inspired it? What did you want people to get from reading it?
So I was in the midst of editing a book I had already written, which is interesting because I don't know if that book will ever like come out now because it just feels like something other. But I was in the midst of editing that, and in March of 2020, and I tend to write with a lot of humor and a lot of
Yeah.
irreverence and be silly. And I was editing this thing, which was like so funny and felt so wrong. Like, I just, especially back in March, we were all so scared and we
Right.
didn't know what the heck was going on. And
Right.
it was supposed to come out at the end of the year. And so I was like, there's no way. There is no way that I can bring this out into the world and have it feel appropriate. And so I talked to my editor and I just said, man, I don't know about this. And she was like, okay, well, what would you want to write? And I said, let me just kind of, peck some things out and kind of see what's here. And I wrote, which I don't, is not the beginning of the book, but there's a part where I talk about what's good will always be good. And I wrote that. I started with talking about my grandparents and remembering these like beautiful times from my childhood, which is one thing that I loved about 2020. 2020 was the hardest year of my life, but it forced me to slow down. And in that pace, I really did come back to myself on so many levels. And I started writing that and I realized, man, I got a lot of stories about how you live through hard things. And I knew that people were about to lived through something really hard. We're still in the midst of what
Yeah.
that is. And I think the ramifications of this will continue to exist for us for a long time. So I just wanted to write about that because, nobody had answers, but there were answers for how to deal with side effects. Like nobody would know how to deal with a pandemic in 2020, but there is a lot of information about how you deal with anxiety, stress, fear, guilt, loss, like all of it. And so that's what I wrote. And I'm really proud of that book. I when I started it, had no idea that I would be editing it and have my marriage fall apart. And I'm really proud of myself for continuing and to keep going, which felt like, how am I going to put this thing out? People know that I'm going through this thing, and now I'm talking about how to go through hard things. It just was like so much. But I'm proud of myself for doing it. And I think, yeah, it's
It's
yeah.
it's amazing. It's super brave. It reminds me of a book that John Kabat-Zinn entitled Full Catastrophe Living. And there's something about showing up for it all, even the hardest things, that can be the best year ever.
Right.
And people going into 2020, we obviously didn't know what was about to happen, and people were like 2020 vision, it's going to be amazing,
Right.
and
Same.
then you're like, oh, worst year ever, and it's like, no, maybe best year possible ever, because we slowed down enough, like you said. And it just made me cry when you said that, the way you said that, which is the good will always be good, like that
Yeah.
doesn't go away.
Right.
And also just like coming home, slowing down enough to like feel your freaking feelings. It's like we're all moving so fast that the things
Hmm.
that we've all been through, and we're like, we're fine, we're fine, we're fine. I'll just watch Netflix more. I'll just scroll my phone more. It's like, you're not freaking fine. And
Hmm.
maybe this year you're a little more fine because you allowed yourself to not be.
Yes.
And that's what you've made space for all of us.
Right. I was not okay. And it was the first time in a decade that I didn't show up regularly for my online community. I wasn't present on social media for 2 months, which was, maybe people listening to this are like, okay, but if you do what I
Right.
do, it was a pretty big deal. And I didn't, I really do want to put goodness and positivity and light into the world. Now, I didn't have any light to offer. The only like joy that I had went to my kids. That's what they got. They got the joy. And then when they weren't here, I was on the floor. And that was what I needed. And I allowed myself to really hold those things. And I came into this year, I was just telling my best girlfriends this the other day. I was like, I've been trying to identify this feeling because I am so energized and hopeful, and I'm still, here working on things are still hard. Like it's not like we waved a magic wand and it suddenly got easier. I was trying to identify it and I was like, I feel like I had a near death experience. Like I feel like my best friend Beans was like, oh, it's like that scene in a movie where you start to step off the sidewalk, but you stopped yourself, and then all of a sudden a bus drove by,
God.
and you realize, like, oh
Woo.
my gosh, this life is so precious. And every single piece of this I appreciate. And I'm so grateful for stuff that, like, me of 18 months ago would not have been this excited that I just got a new puzzle to put together with my kids. Like, we are about to do a cactus puzzle. We are so excited. Like, I would never have appreciated getting to spend time with my best friends. Like, I didn't see my girlfriends. I have 3 best girlfriends that are my
Yeah.
rock. They're like my people. I didn't get to see them for 4 months because of quarantine. And the first time that we saw each other again, we all quarantined, we got tested multiple times. And the first time we all got to be together and like hug each other, we were bawling.
Yeah.
And like, man, I never knew there was going to be a time where I didn't have the ability to hug my best
Right.
girlfriends.
Right. Right.
So I just feel like I came into this year like I appreciate life in such a way that I didn't
Absolutely.
before.
Absolutely. Okay. So as we're sort of wrapping it up a little bit, so what's one thing, because you absolutely are right when you say you knew some things about going through hard stuff, and anyone who knows a little bit about your childhood knows how unbelievably impossible some of that was. And look at you. So what would you want to tell people who are going through it right now? And it might not even be COVID. It might be losing someone to something else. It might be job loss. It might be, what is something you know that they might be able to take with them for getting through that?
I'm going to go with my gut, whether this resonates with everybody or just the one person that it's meant to. We need you here. It does get better. I swear to God, it gets better. But it only gets better if you keep moving forward. I have, I lost my older brother to suicide. And so it's something that is incredibly close to my heart. And I have lost a lot of friends, acquaintances in the last year, especially. This is especially hard for our teenagers because they are so isolated, and many of them are isolated or in quarantine in homes that maybe don't accept and love them for who they are, and so they feel more alone than ever. I swear to God, it gets better. Whatever it is you're going through, if you can just stay here, if you can just hold on, if you can just get through one breath and then the next and then the next. I always think with my brother that he made a split-second decision that was a permanent solution to a temporary problem, right? And he struggled so much. And I am so grateful that he is not in pain anymore. But I also imagine a life that he could have had. And so the resources are out there, the friendships are out there, the people who love you, the pieces that you need. I believe in my heart that you're here for a reason, and you gotta stay with us.
It's so beautiful that that was your answer, because I often say that the opposite of depression is not happiness, but purpose. And the reason I do this show is because I think people don't feel seen, and they feel invisible. I went to New York 4 times to see Dear Evan Hansen. It's like the greatest show ever. And it's all about a kid who commits suicide. And at the end of the day, people, when they ever ask me, why do you do this show? I'm like, for that reason. Like, oh, I didn't get that from the show. I'm like, no, that's it. Because there's a quote, all men lead lives of quiet desperation. And what you just said is, we need you here. That was your go-to response. That is so powerful. That's all that needs to be said. You are needed here. I think, Rachel, people don't think that they're needed. I think that they very quickly compare themselves to the 14 other people on the internet that they looked at yesterday and say, I'm not needed because she's better and she's prettier and this, and therefore I can't get through hard things because I don't feel a sense of purpose. I don't know that there's 4 people who need me. The fact that that was your answer, it speaks volumes about you. So as we're sort of ending, one of the other things that you do in the ending of this book is you talk about reimagining the future, right? So like walking from that, is it possible? Can we find a way to give what gifts we have? Are we needed? And can we find a way to actively be needed? How do we do that?
Absolutely. I mean, this is like everything that I do. It's like, it's exactly what you said. Is I feel like we have this potential, we have these gifts, we have these things inside ourselves, but we compare how we can do that thing with somebody else, right? Well, I can't do it this way or whatever. I have the sweetest woman who cleans my house once a week. Shout out to Sherry. Thank you. So she's in our bubble. I did it for several months. I'll be honest. I was like, Sherry, I need you in this bubble, girl. I need some help. So Sherry was here the other day and she was cleaning. We always chat. And I was teaching her about love languages. And this is sort of
Of
a
course
side
you
note.
were. Of course you were. You're like, Sherry, sit down, have some
Girl,
sandwich with me.
this is
Let's get into it.
I'll talk to a barista. I'll talk to anybody. So I saw this thing on Instagram, and I wish I could remember, like it was served to me. It wasn't like a person I follow. So I don't know who that said this first.
Okay.
So if this is someone else's, this is not my thing. But someone just asked a really simple question. They said, do you ever love yourself in your own love language? And my mind exploded. I was like,
Right.
what? Yes. Which is like, if y'all listening, if you know love languages, we all have them. And this is how we love others and how we hope others love us. But I've never thought of that. So mine for the longest time was words of affirmation. I feel like it shifted to acts of service. And so I was just talking through this to Sherry. I'm getting off on a tangent. Sorry. So I was explaining this to Sherry. And I said, well, Sherry, what's your love language? And she said, I think I would be physical touch. And I was like, she's like, I love hugging people. I miss it so much. And we start talking. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, just so you know, is it a massage? Is it a bubble bath? Is it like things you could do for your physical body that you would be loving yourself? And as we're chatting, she's saying, yeah, you know what I always wanted. And she tells me this dream that she had that was like this thing that she wanted to do in the world. And it was working with people through physical therapy and all of this stuff. And I was like, oh, why don't you do that?
Right.
She's like, oh, I'm older now. And like, what? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. At the very least, I was like, at the very least, Sherry, have you ever thought about volunteering? Like how many, because she was talking about doing things with patients who are older. I'm like, how many like private, I mean, right now things are different, but freaking A, I bet like you could do Zoom calls with people who are in a nursing home right now and they would be so ecstatic.
Right.
And then you already have a relationship. So when pandemic ends, now you've got this existing thing and you can go in and you, like, if this is on your heart, I literally said this to her. I'm like, I believe that when we have those callings on our heart, that is God or the universe, whatever you believe in, telling you what your purpose is. So it doesn't have to be this like, yeah, because she was like, well, I would have to go to school. But I'm like, no, you have a heart to show up for people in this very specific community.
Exactly.
You could be doing that by the end of the week.
Yep.
Like pandemic or not.
Yep.
So I think it's like focus on what, not how. If you start out, if you get your what, and then you immediately jump into all the hows, you will talk yourself out of it.
Yes.
Well, how would I do this? And what would I look? No. Let the what become so big and so like bright and exciting and beautiful that you just jump into any way to achieve that quickly, as opposed to having to be a certain way, or I've got to have a degree, or, I do a lot of, I mentor a lot of women who own small businesses. And I was talking to a mentee today and she was like, well, I would love to have that for the business, but I'm not a certified this. And I feel like I'd have to go back to, and I was like, nope, no, girl, I'll make 2 phone calls and we'll have you can freelance, you can hire someone on a contract. They will certify this for you. You can say certified by a blah, blah, blah. I just think that we make it a lot harder than it is. And so if you have a calling on your heart, an idea, and ladies, let me just say this, because oftentimes women will only chase something if they can convince themselves that it will benefit others.
Right.
Let me say it again for the people in the back. Women will only chase something if they can convince themselves that it will benefit others. I cannot tell you how many times I sit down with these small business owners who are building like incredible things. And they'll be like, yeah, you know what? I want to be able to do this so I could just give back to my community. I want to be able to do, and that may be true, but it's also okay if you want to do something because it lights your heart on fire.
Exactly.
It's okay if you want to do something because you think it's pretty or fun or interesting, or it doesn't always have to be for the greater good of everyone around you.
Oh my God, I know. Okay, last thing I promise is that, just to follow up with what you just said, I think what people could use from you, because it always comes back to imposter syndrome in my audience. And what really is behind that is I will not allow myself to make anything that's not perfect. So I can't start. Like, people need from you, Rachel, if you believe this, which I imagine you do, People need permission to be messy, to make something mediocre, to
Right.
start, to iterate. How do they do that? Otherwise, they don't ever even begin.
Right. Well, here's the thing. It, if you admire me, my career, my books, my podcast, anything that I do in my life, please know that I trudged through 15 years of garbage to get where I am today. And I'm not saying garbage created by others. I am talking, I put out so much crap, so much crap. And the thing is, when you start anything new, you are going to suck. That is without question, you are going to suck. So it really comes down not to, do you want it enough? It's, are you willing to suck for as long as it takes you to become better? Are you willing to suck? Like, people are not afraid of failure. People are afraid of others watching them fail.
Totally.
Which is about your ego. It's not about your work. It's not about your creative process. This is your ego talking. And this goes back to that idea that most of us are raised from the time we're little girls to be perfect. Is your hair okay? Is your body thin enough? Did you dress right? Did you, so that it shows up in our creative process or the businesses that we want to make. Allow yourself to be crap. Like, when Girl Wash Your Face got so huge, everyone was like, oh my gosh, your first book, this is, girl, that was my 6th book. Nobody cared about the books that came before that. Like, you're going to have to suck. And look, imposter syndrome, I feel like everybody doesn't know what they're doing until you get to a place where you're like, holy crap, I totally know what I'm doing. But it took 15 years of sucking and failing and realizing that even if it was bad, I could count on myself. I can count on myself to figure it out. I can count on myself to fix it. It's going to be bad. And then it's going to get a little bit better. And then it's going to be bad again. And then you're going to lose money. And then people don't like it. But all along the way, you're evolving and becoming what you want to be. I really do think that so much of success is a willingness to just stay in the game. Man, I started this race with lots of other people who are not here anymore.
Yeah.
Because they didn't like the flack and they didn't like the feedback and they didn't like not being perfect. So they just pulled themselves out.
Yeah. On my desk.
And I guarantee,
you know this book, the Seth Godin book, The Dip?
I don't.
It's like a 75-page book. It's like a pamphlet. It's not. It's amazing. It's all about how, like, you will hit the dip and most people hit it and they're out.
Right.
And he's like, no, the whole journey is about the dip. It's not even, it's like who you get to become by going through the dip.
Right.
So I want to just ask you, where can people find you? And in that, I feel like you should at least get to mention this absolutely adorable piece of content, which is your new show that comes out Monday mornings. What made you want to do this?
So that's an old school thing. So back in the day, I used to do the show, and honestly, even in the opening, we have like footage of the old stuff because I want people to see where it started. Please go watch. It's called Rach Talk. It's on my YouTube channel. Go watch it if for no other reason than you can see me back in 2016, 2017 with like orange hair, no eyebrows, crazy makeup.
You were so cute.
I was trying stuff and figuring it out and like working through. And so it was this really popular thing that I used to do with my community back in my blogging days. And just for fun, I thought, let's bring it back. Let's just have something that is to entertain people. If you want life advice, read the books, listen to the podcast. This is truly just me trying to make you giggle. And yeah, it comes out Monday mornings on YouTube. And then I'm Ms. Rachel Hollis on all the social platforms. So pretty soon, there won't be an ability to comment. Just FYI.
Get in there now. You have anything to say. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Exactly. Yeah.
The show is absolutely adorable. And I love the pre-roll because I feel like you went from like Ellie Kemper to Beyonce. You were like, hi everyone. And now you're like, queen.
There were some sure Ellie Kemper vibes. I never thought that, but you're absolutely right. That was cute. That was the energy for sure. Right.
God bless her. God
Yes.
bless her. I've laughed through everyone with the deer. I love when you're like the beanie because didn't do the roots because mama
Oh,
didn't get to
girl,
this
they're
salon.
so
Oh,
bad.
minor,
I
forget it.
mean, it's like, and the hair, that's why there's a beanie involved right now, because the
Involved.
roots, we're gonna, it's hard to get your hair done in these times.
Everyone who's listening, obviously the podcast and the show and the books, but also Rise live weekend coming up.
Right. It's coming in May. It's the first time ever that my women's conference is virtual, which I'm genuinely excited about. Number one, because for the first time ever, women who haven't been able to come because of like childcare or travel get to experience this. It means that we'll have a global community instead of just a national one. If you've never seen Rise Conference, it's so much fun. We have a documentary on Amazon Prime. If you look up Rachel Hollis Made for More, you can find it there, and it'll show you kind of what it's all about. But yeah, I'm really excited. The first time it's virtual, and we're going to do some fun stuff with video, and it's going to be a whole thing. So that's coming up in May.
You're a whole thing. And I think what's the most impressive thing about you is how generous you have been over this last hour to me. Like, you don't need to be generous to me. You don't need to make space for me. You don't need to treat me like I'm someone who lives next door. You could just kind of be like, okay. And this is your legacy. You're actually just a really good person.
Thank you. I think, man, I want to show up in the world. Like I'm striving every day to be the woman of my dreams. And that's the kind of person that is present. That's the kind of person that holds space. It's something that I've learned to do over the last many years of getting to be in community with women. It's exactly what you said earlier, that people don't feel seen. And so whether you're coming up to me at a grocery store or an airport or a podcast like this one, I want to hold space for that. And of course, you're just a chick like I am, and we're just chatting. So I meant what I said. I'm grateful for the time, and I'm grateful for a chance to speak to your audience. I swear,
you're the cutest. You're just so freaking lovable. That's what it is about you. Like, you're in the car today and you're like, Brad Paisley texted me. I'm like, you're forgetting that you're famous. Like, you didn't, like, The Rock sent me alcohol. I'm like, of course he did. You're like, oh, it's so cute. You're like, look, this person. And I'm like, I love that.
Honestly, when we did a FaceTime live with him last summer, I think, and he was like, hey, let me get your number. And I was like, okay, Brad Paisley. And I saved it in my phone. And yesterday I was doing a podcast interview like this one, and I saw him, it popped up, and I was like, what?
I know.
And then it was like, hey, I have this song. You want to hear it early? And I was like, what? Yes, I do. I do want to hear it early. What world is this?
I just love that you're officially for sure famous, like with the capital F. And you're like, look at Reese Witherspoon. And like, she's watching you every day and like wants to go to coffee tomorrow. And you're like, we're friends. It's so cute. Never lose that, because that's
you're just. No, it's been a really long time. You know what? I'll tell you, this is a true story. Years ago, it was when my oldest son was like 4 months old. Jeffrey, please stop growling. My oldest son was 4 months old, and we went on a first trip without him. And it was a business trip. My husband at the time was an executive at Disney, and this was back when corporations could still have big, lavish executive whatevers. And so it was in Hawaii, and Dave had gone out there early, and then I flew out to meet him, and then flying back together, we got to fly first class. And he always flew first class. It was my first time ever. And we were riding in a limo from the hotel to the airport to fly home. And all of the executives were like, yeah, it's first class, but it's like the first class where it's like business seats really, and it's not really that nice. And they were like, and they were going off, and I said something because I am this person, and I was like, I hope to God that I never get used to first class. Like, I hope that I never say like, oh, but it's not the nicer version of this. And I still have it. So I keep journals for all of my kids. And I wrote a letter. It was like the start of keeping journals. So I wrote a letter to my son, who was 4 months at the time, and told him the story and said, I never want this for you. My grandparents, who I'm like was very close to, and they are still my angels, um, picked cotton and potatoes. And that's what I wrote to Jackson in that letter that day. Like, you stand on the backs of giants who literally broke their back with an 8th grade education so that you could have the life that you have today. And I will never take this for granted. And I never want to get used to it. And I think that I get to control that. Like, I get to stay surprised and delighted by this life. I never, ever want to take for granted that someone that I admire and have seen in concert 5 times sent me a text. Like, that'll never be normal.
Nope, it's not. And you're not normal. You're just so good. You're so good. May it just continue to be blessed. The path should be blessed, and the coolest, may it just even be better. It's already been so good. Like, let the surprises delight you like you can't even believe, and it should just be good and easy. And because you've gone through a lot, like, let it all be now just super smooth. But so
Thank you.
good. Thank you for being here. So
Of course.
cool to connect with you. And
Absolutely.
maybe somehow one day we'll be in the same place
Someday.
after
I said it to
quarantine.
everybody now on. I'm like, post-pandemic, man, you're one of those people I'm going to tackle with a hug.
Thanks, Rach.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, bye, honey.
Thanks, Emma.